Hi Kapil, congratulations on scoring a 720 on GMAT. And I know that you're not done with it yet. I'm sure that you have much more potential, but 720 is still a stellar score for most of the candidates. And in this interview, we will capture your thoughts, your preparation strategies on how someone can achieve a 720 on GMAT in their first attempt. So let's talk about you first. Like, tell us more, little bit of yourself, and when did you start thinking about GMAT and your MBA journey?
For sure. Yeah. This is Kapilan. I am from the southern part of India, from Trichy. I went to school in Manipal University for 2 years, and then I transferred out to the University of Illinois to complete my undergraduate education. And I've been working in Houston in the energy industry for almost 4 years now. I started thinking about GMAT and MBA almost a year ago. I wanted to grow within my industry and wanted to move over to the renewable side. So that's how I started thinking about the MBA. And I started with, just, oh, I can do this GMAT thing. I just go through the books and I can do very well. And I was preparing for a few weeks and I took a cold mock, not a cold, I took a mock and I scored a 590 and
Okay.
all my dreams came down crashing. And I realized that I needed some more help with in terms of preparation. So I went with a different company primarily because they had the longest amount of time and also the cheapest price. You can figure out which one by these
Okay.
two.
I think the second last clue was actually good enough. So yeah.
Yeah, but I was preparing with them for a month. It was just too overwhelming. There was not really a structure. You just went by it, at a whim, and I didn't really like that. So I started researching more into which course would be best for me, and I uh, came across GMATWhiz on YouTube through GMAT Club, and I really dug deep, watched similar interviews with other students, and I really resonated with their stories and their struggle areas. And I decided to get on a call with you, Piyush, where we talked
Uh,
about the strategy, and I really connected with you too. So that's how I started with GMATWhiz.
so very good point that you mentioned that you saw some other students being interviewed as well. So how does it feel today, you sitting on the other side of the table? Like if you recall those days when you were watching some other people, did you ever have some doubts that okay, can I do this? Like did you ever had some doubts? Like how does it
Oh
feel
yeah.
now?
If anything, if I was filled with anything, it was doubts. So,
Okay.
I would just write everything. I can get a 740. I can get a 760. And as you mentioned before, I I feel great to have gotten a 720 from, especially coming from a 590. But I'm not done. I want to keep moving towards a 740 or 760. But being here with a 720, I did not think I could do it. And when the score flashed up in front of my screen, I was like, I couldn't believe it because the most I've gotten in my marks until then was like 700, 710. So
Okay.
I gave
Okay.
my best effort during the exam day, and was mixed feelings because I had gotten the best score I've gotten until then, but I also uh, felt like there was unfinished business. So
Also,
uh,
it's a mixed feeling, as you said, like joy as well as still knowing that I have to move further. But let me ask you one more question. You mentioned that in the marks you were getting 700 and 710. So which marks were these? Can you shed more light on that?
official marks.
Official marks. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
So
I was
that's
doing bits quizzes before then. And I can talk to this more later, but Shreyas was really of great help. He would guide me through at every stage. He would guide me through which marks and which quizzes that I should take. So the marks that I was taking was official marks, yes.
perfect, perfect. Great to hear that. So it's good to see that you're able to replicate that performance because in many cases people do panic and do get anxious during the test. So I'll definitely cover that angle as well. Like how did you manage that entire test day environment? But let's get started from the beginning. So you mentioned that you studied from a different course. Again, we are not dropping the names here, but then you moved to GMATWhiz. So when you moved to GMATWhiz, what is the difference that you saw like between your previous journey and like the next step of the prep?
For sure. It started with the first of all the UI. I am very big fan of the UI, although I I really like the structure. I am the person who likes to tick boxes. I would like get tasks done one at a time, and GMAT was provided that for me. I would just put in the number of hours I'm willing to study that week, and it would give out the suggestions. You can mix between verbal and quant, and I like that mix as well. But I liked the structure of the platform, and I also liked the calendar approach. And even though you have your course scheduled, if you take your diagnostic quiz and if you do really well in a particular section, I also like that it would, it will take it off of your study schedule. It will suggest that you take it off, but I went through it. And even if you took it off and if you take a quiz at the very end, I like that it will analyze where you went wrong and it will suggest the things that you should improve. It will suggest like,
There's a fail-safe mechanism in place even if you skip certain things.
for sure, for sure. Even if you remove that module in the first place, thinking that you are strong, if you prove that you are wrong in it, if you're weak in it, it will add you back, add that back up. So that was really, I like that support mechanism and redundancy that's built into the platform for sure.
It took us good 4 months to just write down the requirements for this, and we thought of all the use cases. In fact, in the morning earlier this day, I was speaking to another candidate, and
Right.
this guy had used another competitor course like EGMAT, if I may use the name, and they also have a feature of reducing the course content based on a diagnostic. But he
Right.
felt that in many cases he was overestimating himself and he was letting go of few things, and later on he was realizing that this is something he's weak at just because he ignored it because of the diagnostic. And I was telling
Right.
him the same thing, that there should be a fail-safe mechanism in place where you should be able to get back things which you have been ignoring till now.
For
So
sure. And
totally
that really
agree.
helped me. So
That is
that's
definitely required, because it's possible that in that particular question, like because of which the diagnostic felt you are good, might have like might have gotten it right because of other reasons also. But in reality, you were not that strong in that concept. So that's a very important part. All right.
exactly.
So you like the structure. You had a proper plan of action with you, where you used to put in the number of hours, and it used to give you a task list. Now, where did you start your journey with? So in that 590 mock score that you received, like what was your strength, quant or verbal, like basically?
Quant was definitely my strength. I think I scored a V29 or a V30, 31 or
Close
something.
to like verbal 30, basically.
Yeah, close to a verbal 30. So quant was definitely like around 44, 46 or something like that. So
Okay.
I'm not really sure of the breakdown, but quant was definitely my strongest of the two, but verbal, I had a lot of room to improve on. So I definitely did start with verbal preparations. So I would just go through the entire module, starting from, I think, starting from SC, and then learning the meaning-based approach. That's one thing that I also appreciated, that in other courses, it would just say, hey, this is unidiomatic or something like that. Not the proper idiom, it's not the proper sentence, but they won't go into why that sentence is not correct, which did not really help in my learning process, because I wanted to know what I did wrong so I can correct it or rectify it in the future, which is something that GMATWhiz really did extremely well. It broke the you guys break down every question, and I would say more than solving the question, reading the explanation behind this question takes longer, and I like that because it builds a fail-proof mechanism for the future. So that's something I really appreciated.
That's very important, because what happens most of the times is that people look at sentence correction as grammar. And when you look at it as grammar and you don't focus on logic, you're not utilizing your 100% potential, because then you're just relying on a memory, you're not relying on analysis or analytical reasoning. And the solutions definitely, Kapilan, like it takes students' effort to go through it, but it has taken much more effort for us to create it in the very first place. The entire reason why we did that was because we knew that if students don't have a benchmark to compare themselves against, in many
Yeah.
cases, they don't even realize that they are not actually using the approach correctly. They are thinking about the meaning, but that's not sufficient. They have to use it in the right way. In fact, that brings me to one of the points. Like I was just going to share some notes about your prep journey with me. So we wanted to keep this interview impromptu so that we didn't ask you to think about it. But just referring to his notes that I saw, he mentioned a very important thing there, that when you were also going through the SC course, you felt that you were using the meaning-based approach to the T. But a few discussions later with Shreya, she realized that you are not actually doing it entirely, you are doing it partially. So can you expand on that thought, like what was happening earlier and how did you realize where you're going wrong?
Exactly. I'll add two parts to this answer. First of all, the answer explanations that you give in the platform is very good, and it often happens the case that one explanation doesn't reach everyone, so you can ask, hey, I don't understand this question. Some in the forum, someone will answer it within a day, and most probably if it's an old question or it's a question that's been there for a while, there's been other discussions that help you understand what you went wrong. Beyond that, I still wasn't it wasn't reaching. So I had to I sat down with Shreyas and during the 15-minute free mentoring calls that you guys provide, and I gave him some data, and he analyzed the data, and he said, hey, I think SC is where you are basically going wrong, so let's get on a mentorship call. And then we got on a tutoring call, and he asked me to analyze a few questions, asked me to break down sentence by sentence how I thought about it, and there are some things, even if you learn a course, if you solve a course, there's something that you do not catch by yourself, and that's where I thought this tutoring call really came into rescue for me, where I would just by default I would assume sentence A was right, and then I would compare all the four other sentences to sentence A, option A, to make sure that sentence A is the right one. So that was not the right approach, and there was also missing through prepositional phrases, and I was not really in a spot where I could completely understand the meaning of the sentence. And getting on a call with Shreyas, and when he walked through word by word and how to break the sentences, and it sounds very simple when you hear about it, but it is
That's the
definitely
art, basically. That's the most difficult part to do, I think.
exactly.
No, very well said. In fact, what happens is that when you are studying, like as I said, like most people think that if you have to just think about the meaning. So what happens is that sometimes you end up missing out on those small prepositional phrases, are like those innocuous things which are tiny, but they kind of change a lot in terms of meaning that is being communicated. So
Yeah,
sometimes you end up missing out on a few aspects, and that's when you realize that okay, when you understand that okay, this is the right reading style, it can actually do wonders. So great to hear that. So after this session that you had with Shares, when you were looking at the solutions on the platform, were you able to get more value out of the solutions as well? Like, did it
for
help?
sure, for sure. And I was at a point where, as I mentioned, I'm a box ticker, so I just go through the module and I'll do the questions and I would solve it, and I would just tick the box. Oh yeah, I know this module, and I'll move on. But having the reality check with that 15-minute mentorship calls was really helpful in spotting my errors. And once I went through the tutoring calls, and once I went back to the platform, and I was able to comparisons and parallelism were few of my weakest areas, and it would just those off, it would just pop out at my eyes, and like, yeah, that's what to.
These are the indicators where,
Yeah. And he wasn't even he would not be afraid to even like suggest external sources if you want to strengthen weak areas, which I also appreciated because it's a free resource. Ultimately it's helping me, and it's helping me perform better. So um, I also appreciated those as well.
So that's the end goal. The end goal is to get you across the line, whatever is the right thing. So it's really good to hear that you found the mentorship discussions which is really helpful. So what is your one tip, like if for the GMAT students who are watching this interview, what is your one tip for sentence corrections code improvement that was for you?
Yeah. it sounds again like repetitive, but meaning-based approach, like break it down. And I would say break it down. And one thing that I would do is before starting to solve every SC question, or before I went into a quiz, I would mark down these are the things: parallelism and comparison and prepositions. There are 5 things that like usually that they test, and I would just write down words to look out for, which that when those words come out, what do I need to look out for? How does that affect the sentence meaning of the sentence? Using like a short list, and like
Mhm.
reminding your mind that this is what you're on the lookout for, and also looking out for meaning. I would say it's like the hot tip for SE.
So something like the pause points that we recommend, that we pause at these kind of pointers, for you, which that were like relative pronouns were important, parallelism markers were important, and then think about the meaning from that perspective.
For
Very,
sure.
very
Yeah.
good. I'm going to ask you one more question on that. So when you were thinking about the meaning-based approach, were you not aware of worried that it is going to consume a little more time? Do we have that much time to solve questions?
Yeah, yeah, that's something that I had watched at that point enough webinars from
Okay.
you guys to know that it was going to take me longer. So I was willing to put up with it, but there were times where I was like, "Why the heck do I have to go through 10 minutes reading an answer to a question where I can solve 5 more questions?" But I I that at that point it got deep into my head that I need to put up more time. So if anything, keep listening to more interviews to grab this. So it becomes your mantra
Yeah,
to,
you see more and more people repeating the same story, and you understand that this is gonna work.
yeah.
That's great. That's great.
And that's ultimately what it is, right? You get on like a formula, you get on a repetitive task, and you just take it on from there.
Yeah, yeah, that's the main thing. Like you learn from others' mistakes, others' success, both. So that's right. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about CR. So I think like you worked on SC first, then CR, and then RC. That is the usual method that we follow. So you also followed the same.
Right.
Okay. So what was your approach for CR and RC? I understand that they are very similar with respect to
Right.
the skills being tested. So what was your approach over there? How did it change from your previous approach when you were using the other course? Yeah.
Yeah. When I was using the other course, I did not get to the level of CR yet.
Okay.
So most of my preparation was new, and
Okay.
thankfully CR was one of my stronger suits
Okay.
within verbal. SC was my weakest, and followed by the actual exam. RC turned out to be the weakest of all 3, but as CR has always been my strongest suits, and carrying all my learnings from SC, I really understood what they're trying to say, and
Mhm.
I would I would know what the inferences of the question is, and then try to analyze how uh, how that affects the questions or the answers. So I felt like going through the modules, I felt like I got a good grasp of CR. So
Okay, so let's
I
focus a little more on RC. You mentioned that CR was still something which was a little more natural to you.
Yeah.
So, like, what was the challenge that you faced in RC the most, and how did you overcome that challenge?
I wasn't able to. I'm someone who lacks focus. That's why I try to be organized. So
Okay,
I wasn't able to comprehend everything in the short time, and then go back, you know, keep everything in my mind, and then go back
okay,
to answer every question. So that's something that I also worked on exclusively towards the end of my preparation,
okay,
where I would just exclusively solve RC questions, break down, Shreyas again would help me with this too. He would ask me to read every paragraph, pause, read every sentence, and pause and see how the next sentence connects to the previous sentence, and then write
okay.
down a short, small gist of the paragraph, and then keep on moving. But it's it's something that is still a work in progress for me. But so I won't be able to give like an expert advice
It's
there
still
yet.
something which has to improve a lot more, but you have definitely worked significantly on that. So what I understand from you is that initially when you were doing RCs, it was like when you read that information, you're not able to retain that information that read, and then for each question you had to refer back to the passage, which was taking probably a lot more time for you. Then what you started doing was that you started focusing on the connection between the first sentence to the second and the second to the third. This connection, when you try to identify the connection, you used to note down those connections, right? Not the detail in your notebook, maybe. So this did help you retain the information better, right?
And I took a lot more time reading the passage as opposed to solving each questions. So I would spend like most time. I don't know the exact breakdown. It's been a while since I took the exam. But I would spend most time reading the passage and like maybe 30 to like 45 seconds solving the actual question.
No, that's the right approach. Like if you give me a passage today, if it's a medium passage, I would take 3-4 minutes to read it, and then 30 seconds per question. If it's a hard passage, I might take 5 minutes to read it, but answer to solve each question is still 40 seconds or 1 minute. So that's the right approach, because then you are actually making sure that you understand the context well in the first go, and then you move forward and tackle those questions, basically.
Yeah.
That's separate. Okay, so we talked about your prep journey, like in the beginning, like you started going through the modules, you followed the study plan, you focused on SC, then CR, then RC. We talked about the approach, but what did you do after completing the course? Like after completing the verbal course, what was your focus after that?
I did the quant course, but after completing the quant course as well, what I did was analyzed. I would do the WIS quizzes,
Okay.
and then figure out where my weak areas were, and also I would do the GMAT club or timed questions, and then Shreyas also helped me analyze. But he gave me Excel sheet with breakdown of every topics, and I would ask me to time the time the questions and how I did on those. So I would do that primarily getting in exam mode, solving questions within a time, because until that point I would take 3-4 minutes to solve a question, but I made sure that
You get the approach right.
met the approach right and I got the answer correct. But after that, I needed to slowly, the key is slowly bring the time down, and he would give me, hey, you need to solve 20 questions in this much time, and analyze these questions, and then move on to the next 20 questions, but solve it in even lesser time, and then. So incrementally, he helped me get to the ideal time that I wanted, and he also was towards the end of the exam. He was like, "Yeah, you're gonna end up with questions that you don't know the answer for. It's okay to skip those questions because overall, if you spend more time in that, that's something that you don't really put too much thought on. But when you take a step back and analyze the amount of time you're splitting, it makes total sense to skip that question if it's taking too long and then move on to the next one instead of being that as a thing. So getting in on the exam mode was something that I definitely spent the most time after going through the verbal courses. Yeah.
Great,
Sectional,
great.
yeah, that's
sectional test, you said.
yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. So you mentioned that in 2 steps. So you mentioned that first you identified your weak area and you worked on the WIS quiz, which is the customized quizzing platform, and then you started taking this time test, basically, right? Or was this in parallel? Like, was this sequential or in parallel?
See, parallel for
In
sure.
parallel. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you identify these weak areas that you mentioned? Like, what were the criteria that you would look at for identification of these weak areas?
Firstly, it was through the platform itself. When you go into analysis or something, or
Dashboard, basically. Yeah.
it would give me the weakest areas. And by then, I had gotten on enough calls with Shreyas that I would know that SC was my weakest areas, and within SC, comparisons and parallelism was the weakest link of all. So I would just filter out in the Excel sheet, filter out comparisons and parallelism. I would just only solve like medium and hard questions at first, but then towards the end I would mix it up with all three difficulty levels, but I would solve only medium and hard questions, like because the test is not adaptive at that point, so I would just solve those.
There's no point on doing easy questions. You'll not get it.
Exactly. And make sure that I hit the level of accuracy he suggested me that I hit. It was usually like 70-80%, and then keep on improving from there. So at that point, definitely the guidance helped me figure out where my weakest links were, and then I just doubled down by solving more questions structurally, and then structurally, and then like with the less and less time over time.
Understood. So basically, to summarize, what you did was you looked at the dashboard data because they're on the GMATWhiz platform, and you had discussion with your mentor. Combining both the inputs, you understood what your weak areas are, and then you focus specifically on them. Initially, you focused on getting them structurally right, as in your conceptual knowledge and application approach in place. Once you felt comfortable with that, you achieved that 70-80% accuracy benchmark which was set by Shreyas for you. You then started working on timing. You took the timing and you started then gradually reducing the timing till the point where you feel that you're not comfortable with the time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then towards the end, I would just take official marks, timed. Would take at the exact same time. I registered for the exam, was like 8 a.m. in the morning. I'd wake up, do the exact same routine, and then get myself in the exam mode, solve 3.5 hours of the entire test, and then get myself used to that.
That's very important. That's very important because I see people taking the exam, booking the date for 8 a.m. and then they're not able to sleep the night before completely, and then they're super anxious and super tired. So that's a great advice. So anyone of you who's watching this, if you are taking the test for a certain slot, make sure that you are making yourself accustomed, your body accustomed, your mind accustomed, so that you are at your peak when you are actually attempting to GMAT. So that's
2 days before the exam, make sure you sleep because you're not gonna learn anything in 2 days, and you need a rested mind before the exam for sure.
That's great. That's like this is exactly the kind of suggestions I give to students, and they come to me and say, "Piyush, you know what? My exam is in the next 2 or 3 days. Any last minute tips?" I tell them, "Close your books, party hard. That's all you need to do. Just relax now." So good to hear. So let's talk about the exam day also. Like on the day of the test, you mentioned that your mock scores are around 700, 710. So what helped you in replicating your mock performance exactly on the test day? Like what helped you keep calm? Like we understand the other things that you mentioned, like sticking to a schedule and getting proper sleep. Apart from that, what else did you do?
One question at a time. One question at a time. And then I would just, if I get stuck in a question, I would just take a quick deep breath and then focus on the next question. That's something that I also had.
That's very easy to say, but it's very tough to replicate. I'm 100% sure.
And that's something that I practiced during the mocks too, not the first mock, but during the next 2 mocks that I took, was one question at a time, and just take a deep breath and keep moving on. And I can tell you that during the exam, I felt really bad about a few questions, and I kind of knew that where I went wrong was again mostly on RC, but I didn't let that hold me back, and I just took a deep breath, kept moving on. Breathing really helps.
So that's very, very important. In fact, that's something which many people underestimate on the test. But in reality, like every single question is different. Your last question has no bearing on the next question. It has happened already. You can't go back and change it. So there's no point in thinking about it. And this is probably the most important tip that Kapilan has given to us today. Like if you guys want to ace the GMAT, you have to stay with a clear mind and focus all your attention on that day.
And don't worry about if you're getting easy question, hard question, medium question. You do not know, especially when your adrenaline is rushing through and you are focused on the next question. There's no point worrying about things like that.
Possible that you might think something is easy, something is hard, which is reality is something altogether different as well. Right? So that's great. That's great. So any other tips like any other tips that you want to share with our viewers today?
Yeah, my parting advice would be to not have an end date in goal. So I started this journey almost a year back, and life happened. Things would happen like throughout the journey. So I would put it off for a month, come back, put it off for a few weeks, come back. So if I had the end date in goal, I would have pushed through and I have done it. So don't say if you're starting your preparation early, about a year early, like I did. So don't think that, oh, I have a year to prepare. Have an end date, work towards the end date for sure. Something there's one other person like me who is listening to this. Book a date. I mean, of
Very
course,
important.
talk to your mentor and see when you will be ready, but don't just blindly book a date, but book a date and work towards the date.
Calculate it properly, have a proper solid basis behind it, but make sure that you have a date in mind so that even if, let's say, there is a little more work pressure which is coming in, you still try to at least navigate your way through it other than just giving on to it.
Right.
So just one
Exactly.
more follow-up question on this, Kapilan. You mentioned that there were a lot of breaks in between your study. So how did you, like, again, there are many students who will still end up doing this because of whatever reason. So how did you maintain that momentum, or let's say, how did you build that lost momentum again when you started your prep after a few months of gap?
Solving questions and picking back the weaker points there for
Okay.
sure. So if when I leave, I would not suggest people have breaks in their studies, but again, life happens, some things come up, projects come up, people move. So if you take a break, come back, don't jump right back into like, oh yeah, I'm gonna solve questions, I'm gonna pick back where I left off, but it doesn't always happen. So I would just do a few questions and see where I went wrong, make sure that I remember everything that I had learned until that point. And then if there are any weak areas, I would immediately go back, watch those particular modules and make sure that I am strong before I moved on, because everything connects, especially in verbal. Everything connects. SC connects to CR and then connects to RC. So it's very important to keep that flow.
Perfect, perfect. Any other advice that comes to your mind? I know we have given a lot of great advice to people, very pinpointed thoughts, and I'm really happy about that. But any other thing that you want to talk about?
I think I've gotten everything out of my
Perfect,
of my
perfect, perfect. Great, Kapilan. It was really great having you here today. Like, thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule. It's really early for you. I understand that. So thank you so much for taking out time, and be focused now. Like you're halfway through, more than halfway through, I would say, because you have already gotten to a number which is respectable enough. And I probably discussed with you on our first call as well that with your profile even a 720, 730 will work decently. But it's always good to aim for a little higher, because the more, like, if you aim for 740, 750, you can even look at a scholarship from the same schools that you can get admitted to. So keep working on it, and yeah, feel free to reach out if you have if you need any other support, anything later on.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna settle for a score. That's something that I used to do, but yeah, I'm not gonna.
Like that spirit, and then definitely we have had multiple students in the past where we have conducted an interview earlier, because they still had a Stellar score and they have gotten ahead and taken the GMAT again, scored a 750, 760. So who knows, we might call you for another interview, maybe like talk about the last 2 months strategy that you followed, maybe for that improvement. So yeah, let's look
Thank you.
forward to it.
Thank you. And I also
So
thank you. Shout out to Shreyas.
no, definitely. Shreyas has done an amazing job. Like, I was just going through his notes, and his notes was sufficient enough to give me a very good idea about like all the kind of discussions that you guys had, and like how you guys moved in the right direction. So definitely, I pass on your regards to him, and even shares the interview link with him so he can watch it. That's all.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.